Hello everyone and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Today channel.
Taylor and Brooke quarrel about a new man. The news that Nick Marone has returned to Los Angeles and appears to be pursuing Brooke Logan surprises Taylor Hayes. Whether this is a good or terrible thing is unclear to her. While Nick can undoubtedly divert Brooke's attention from her fixation on Ridge Forrester, he might also be able to divert Taylor. Nick used to be the source of arguments between Brooke and Taylor. They reasoned that since they were so skilled in fighting for Ridge, why not switch the target of the rivalry to another man? Jack Marone's birth caused some strangeness, but at least we now know what he is doing. Taylor feels it's time to speak with Brooke again and assess the issue in light of this fresh, juicy knowledge. One more furious argument. Over the past 6 months, Brooke and Taylor have had several intense arguments about Ridge. It's time to get one over Nick now. Taylor questions whether Brooke will simply forget her fate and run off to another man as if it were nothing, but Brooke plays the innocent. Taylor might support this since she knows that having Nick around will help her keep Ridge. Or perhaps she is afraid of what will happen in the end. A guy frequently desires what he cannot have, thus Nick's presence can let Ridge recognize how much he still wants Brooke. Taylor and Brooke keep arguing over the past and their previous behaviors with both men. Given that Nick didn't come back to chase Taylor, is Brooke going to accuse her of being the one who is jealous now? He has declared himself to be Brooke's destiny and is back for her and Brooke alone. It's a long-running argument between two elderly women who, despite their best efforts, are unable to stop thinking about two Playboy brothers. Perhaps Thorne Forrester should make a comeback to provide even more complexity. Brooke Logan had always been a woman of irresistible allure, seductive, passionate, reckless at times, but undeniably magnetic, and now, as word spread through the hills of Los Angeles like wildfire that Nick Marone had returned, that allure seemed to radiate with renewed energy, shaking the already delicate foundations of peace that had barely begun to settle between her and Taylor Hayes. For Taylor, the news hit like a gust of wind through the ruins of an old battlefield, the kind of battlefield paved with designer heels, perfume-scented tears, and more broken hearts than anyone cared to count. She stood quietly in her minimalist Beverly Hills living room, phone still in hand after receiving the news from Steffi, her mind already ablaze with questions. Why now? Why him? Why Brooke, again? The last time Nick Marone had been a central figure in their lives, things spiraled into absolute chaos, culminating in the birth of Jack Marone, a child tangled in DNA, confusion, and motherhood by proxy, a child that Taylor gave birth to but Brooke biologically owned. Taylor had thought they had moved past that chapter. Hadn't Brooke claimed to be done with chasing men? Hadn't she sobbed her promises that Ridge was her one and only destiny, the man she would never let go of again? And yet, here they were, like the swinging of a gilded pendulum, back to square one, a new, but familiar, man dangling in the air between them like a golden apple from Mount Olympus, and two modern-day goddesses ready to claw their way to possession. Taylor remembered the soft timbre of Nick's voice, the smell of salt still clinging to his skin from years on the sea, and the way he always seemed to carry the weight of the world like a casual accessory. He wasn't Ridge, for better or worse, but he had a gravitational pull all his own. He had loved them both, in his own imperfect, tortured way, and for a moment, Taylor had believed she could be the one to fix him, to suit the broken pieces left behind by Brooke. And now, he was back. Not just back in the city, but back in Brooke's orbit. And something about that felt dangerously familiar. She told herself she didn't care, that this was good, even. Let Brooke get distracted, let her focus all that swirling romantic energy on someone other than Ridge. It would give Taylor the breathing room she needed to cement her own place in Ridge's life, to build something real, something mature, something not dependent on stolen kisses or dramatic ultimatums. But deep down, buried beneath years of therapy, yoga retreats, and self-help books that promise to heal old wounds, Taylor felt it, the sting of rejection. Nick didn't come back for her. He didn't even call. And that, in its own quiet way, hurt more than she was willing to admit. So she did what she always did when things began to spin, she scheduled a face-to-face with Brooke. Brooke opened the door to her state with that same smile she always wore, polished, radiant, but tinged with superiority, and Taylor stepped inside knowing the battle had already begun. So, Taylor began casually, folding her arms with practiced calm. Nick's back in town. Brooke tilted her head, as if she'd just remembered, and then smiled wider. Isn't that interesting? He called me last night. Said he's looking for something familiar. Taylor blinked, almost laughing. Of course, he did. The air in the room thickened. The two women circled one another emotionally, as they had for decades, their past echoing in every passive-aggressive comment and forced chuckle. Are you really going to do this again? Taylor asked finally. Run straight into the arms of the next available Forrester-adjacent man because Ridge looked at me too long during a family dinner? Brooke's eyes narrowed. You know, Taylor, you really should stop projecting. Maybe Nick just realized who his real destiny was all along. Destiny? Taylor scoffed. That word should be retired from your vocabulary. You say that about every man who makes eye contact with you. And there it was, the spark that ignited the emotional gasoline that always pooled beneath their every interaction. You're just upset he didn't come back for you, Brooke fired. You've always been jealous of my connection with Ridge, with Nick, with anyone who's ever truly loved me. Taylor clenched her fists, a controlled fury in her eyes. Don't confuse jealousy with concern. I'm just tired of watching you blow up lives and then act like the victim when the dust settles. And I'm tired of you hiding behind your degree and your therapist persona like you're emotionally superior when we both know you're just as wrecked as I am, Brooke snapped. At least I don't hide my feelings. No, you just act on them without thinking. And look where that got us, remember Jack? The name landed like a bomb between them. They both froze. I raised that boy, Taylor whispered. I gave birth to him. And then I stepped in when you couldn't handle it, Brooke interrupted. You handed him back like he was a mistake. Taylor's voice cracked. He wasn't a mistake. I just couldn't look at him without seeing you. Silence. Then Brooke's eyes softened. Maybe that's why Nick didn't come back to you. Maybe he sees through the facade now. Maybe he remembers who really stood by him when everything fell apart. Taylor shook her head. Or maybe he just wanted someone easy. And let's be honest, Brooke, you've always been easy. Brooke gasped, the words landing like a slap, but before she could respond, Taylor added, you act like this is some great romantic reunion, but it's not. It's another cycle. You and Nick didn't work for a reason. Just like you and Ridge didn't. Just like you and anyone. You mean just like you and Ridge? Brooke shot back. You really think he's going to stay with you once he finds out I'm with Nick? Ridge wants what he can't have. He always has. If I'm taken, he'll come crawling back. Taylor laughed bitterly. So that's your plan? Use Nick to make Ridge jealous? Oh, please. I don't need to use anyone. Nick wants me. No, he wants the idea of you. The idea he had years ago. He doesn't know the version of you that's been desperately clinging to Ridge for decades. And you do? Brooke asked, voice rising. You think you're better than me because you spent 5 years in therapy after every failed relationship? Taylor stepped closer. I think I've grown. I think you're stuck. And I think you'll destroy Nick the same way you've destroyed every other man who's loved you. The room pulsed with tension. Their voices had risen to the kind of level only operatic confrontations could reach. It was the kind of fight that had defined their shared history, passionate, layered, and maddeningly repetitive. Somewhere in the chaos, Brooke poured a glass of wine. If you're done preaching, I'd like to enjoy my evening. I have a date. Taylor stared. With Nick? Of course. Brooke smiled, a touch cruelly. He's picking me up in 30 minutes. We're going to that little French bistro you always loved. Unbelievable, Taylor muttered. You're doing this just to spite me. Brooke raised her glass. No. I'm doing it because I can. And because he asked me. Maybe next time, he'll call you, if he gets bored. Taylor turned to leave, then paused. Just remember what happened last time, Brooke. Last time you played with fire, everyone got burned. Including Jack. Brooke's smile faded slightly, but she didn't respond. Taylor walked out, heels clicking like gavel strikes on marble, each step filled with restrained fury. Alone, Brooke stared at her reflection in the mirror, the same one she had used to check her makeup decades earlier when Ridge would come calling. She adjusted her lipstick, wondering briefly if Taylor was right, if this was another cycle. But then her phone buzzed. A text. Outside. Nick. And just like that, the doubt vanished. She descended the stairs, glowing, radiant, renewed. Outside, Nick stood by a sleek black car, his hands in his pockets, his smirk the same as it ever was. "Brooke," he said. "You look incredible." "You always say that," she replied. "Because it's always true," he answered. As they drove off, Taylor watched from her own window, rage and regret coiling around her like smoke. Maybe it was time she made a call of her own. Maybe it was time Thorne Forrester came back to town. Because if Brooke wanted a war, Taylor was finally ready to fight it without rules. Taylor's embarrassing fiancé trap, Ridge's life-altering ambush. Taylor Hayes will not allow her opportunity to be happy with Ridge Forrester to pass her by. Taylor doesn't want anything to stand in the way of their future together now that Ridge is back, especially not Brooke Logan. It's clear that Taylor is worried about Ridge's feelings of envy at Nick Marone's reappearance. Taylor is being shaken since it's obvious that Ridge is far too possessive of Brooke. Taylor will therefore shortly conduct some brainstorming and devise a strategy to secure this revitalized Ridge chapter. In the hopes that it will result in her engagement, Taylor will plan a life-altering ambush. Naturally, it would be good if BNB would allow Taylor to have some dignity. Rather, they are preparing Taylor for her humiliating fiancé trap. After obtaining a ring, Taylor intends to show it to Ridge at a dinner at Il Giardino. It appears that Taylor is hoping that by hurrying Ridge to the altar, he would put Brooke out of his mind and concentrate on her. Additionally, Taylor might think that becoming engaged would validate their love and make it obvious to Brooke that they are not backing Ridge. Fans are already furious on social media since BNB's preview video for the week of June 23rd to 27th gives a sneak peek at the impending proposal. Seeing Taylor go to such lengths to keep Ridge away from Brooke is embarrassing. Ridge will react awkwardly to Taylor popping the question, which will exacerbate the situation. Ridge might be hesitant to get married once Taylor proceeds with her plan in the upcoming episodes. However, Nick will notice the proposal when it finally comes to pass, so he will eventually have some news to share with Brooke. Now that Steffi Forrester has pushed Carter Walton to help Hope Logan move past her Daphne Rose problems, he might be up to the task. Taylor Hayes had always prided herself on being composed, intelligent, and dignified in a world that often rewarded chaos more than calm. A woman of grace and a world-renowned psychiatrist, she was used to analyzing other people's emotional blind spots, but it seemed she was becoming increasingly blind to her own. Ever since Ridge Forrester had wandered back into her life with his trademark brooding stare and promises of closure, Taylor had felt the pull, the magnetism of a man she had loved and lost more times than she could count. But this time felt different. This time, she was convinced it was their last chance. The stars had aligned, the winds of fate had finally shifted in her favor, and she wasn't going to let Brooke Logan, her eternal rival in love, tear down what had just begun to heal. Taylor believed she had Ridge's heart again, and more importantly, she believed she had earned it. But doubt, that dark seed planted long ago by years of betrayal, began to grow roots inside her, especially after Nick Marone's unexpected return rattled the fragile peace she and Ridge had just started to build. Ridge's reaction to Nick's reappearance was telling. Far too invested, far too intense, especially when it came to Brooke. It had been years, yet the mere idea of Brooke being close to Nick sparked a protective flame in Ridge, one that Taylor couldn't ignore. It was that flame, not the love they were supposedly rekindling, that ignited Taylor's fear. Deep down, she knew Ridge still harbored feelings for Brooke, feelings that could be reignited at any moment. And so, Taylor, always the fixer, the planner, did what she knew best. She constructed a strategy, a lifeline she could throw to Ridge that would tether him to her permanently. The plan was simple on the surface, deceptively elegant, an ambush wrapped in candlelight and red wine, a public proposal that would leave Ridge no room to back out. But beneath the surface, it was desperation masquerading as hope. She'd scoured jewelry boutiques until she found the perfect ring, nothing too flashy, but meaningful, symbolic, carrying the weight of all their shared years of love, loss, and everything in between. Il Giardino, the restaurant where so many key moments had unfolded in Forrester family lore, was the setting. Taylor knew the location well, and she also knew Ridge's tastes. She reserved their favorite table by the fountain, the one they'd sat at during that brief window in time when she'd believed they were finally free of Brooke's shadow. Taylor rehearsed her speech over and over, each word meant to evoke nostalgia, sincerity, permanence. She told herself this proposal wasn't just about Ridge choosing her, it was about them choosing each other, finally stepping out of the cycle of chaos and committing to peace. But despite her well-constructed rationale, Taylor couldn't silence the voice inside her that warned she was forcing something Ridge wasn't ready for. And she wasn't. Ridge, ever the conflicted soul, still hadn't come to terms with the true reasons he kept oscillating between Brooke and Taylor like a human pendulum of indecision. His passion for Brooke burned bright but unstable, his love for Taylor was rooted, secure, but perhaps lacking that wildfire heat. And as the day of the proposal arrived, Ridge felt something was off. He couldn't put his finger on it, but the weight of expectation was suddenly suffocating. When Ridge arrived at Il Giardino that evening, he was greeted by candlelight and soft violin music, a carefully curated ambience Taylor had arranged to the last detail. She wore Ridge's favorite shade of blue, her hair pulled back in a way that revealed the delicate features he had always admired. Ridge smiled warmly, but there was a flicker of hesitation behind his eyes that Taylor tried to read, tried to trust. They chatted lightly over dinner, but Taylor's mind was spinning, counting the moments until she would go down on one knee, reversing the traditional roles, taking control of her future. Finally, she couldn't wait any longer. As Ridge reached for his wine glass, Taylor stood up and said his name softly, her voice trembling slightly. The restaurant hushed as she pulled the box from her purse and opened it to reveal the ring, a symbol of years of dreams deferred. Ridge froze. His smile faltered. His eyes widened not with joy, but with something darker, confusion, even dread. He hadn't expected this. Of course, Taylor had every right to propose. Of course, it wasn't unprecedented. But this wasn't how he had envisioned their journey, not as a cornered man being pushed into a commitment he wasn't ready for. And Taylor saw it, saw everything flash across his face like a train wreck in slow motion. The murmurs of nearby diners filled the silence between them. Ridge hesitated too long, and in that hesitation, Taylor's world cracked. Then came Nick. Nick Marone, always at the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right one, depending on your angle, stepped into the restaurant at that very moment, his eyes widening as he caught sight of Taylor kneeling, Ridge speechless, and a diamond ring glinting under the chandeliers. Nick's smirk was barely contained as he took out his phone. Brooke would want to hear about this immediately. Back at home, Brooke Logan had just begun to consider whether her chapter with Ridge had truly ended. She tried to believe it had. But the heart rarely obeyed reason. The minute her phone lit up with Nick's message, her curiosity overwhelmed her better judgment. Taylor just proposed to Ridge at Il Giardino. He looked like he wanted to disappear. Brooke's hands shook. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Part of her pitied Taylor, how far she had sunk in her quest to secure Ridge's love. Another part felt vindicated. Ridge had never truly let go of her, and now Taylor's public spectacle had only highlighted that. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Ridge gently lifted Taylor to her feet, his words slow, measured, heavy with meaning. Taylor. I care about you so much. But I'm not ready for this. Not like this. And there it was, the rejection. Not loud, not cruel, but no less devastating. Taylor felt the blood rush to her cheeks, humiliation mounting like a tide. The restaurant, which had felt like a dream just an hour ago, now felt like a cage. She excused herself and left, the ring box still clutched in her trembling hand. The fallout was immediate and brutal. News of the proposal spread quickly. Il Giardino's staff weren't above whispering to eager ears. Steffi Forrester was livid. She had championed her mother's happiness, encouraged her to pursue Ridge, to fight for the future she deserved. Now she was watching her mother spiral into emotional freefall, humiliated and heartbroken. Thomas, on the other hand, felt conflicted. He never liked how Ridge treated Taylor like a backup plan, a safe harbor when storms with Brooke got too rough. Carter Walton, meanwhile, was dealing with his own romantic entanglements, having been subtly nudged by Steffi to distract Hope Logan from her attachment to Daphne Rose, a rising star who Hope had mentored with suspicious devotion. Carter, ever the loyal Forrester ally, saw in Taylor's downfall a cautionary tale. Love without self-respect is just longing dressed in desperation. Taylor retreated to her home, where she faced the crushing truth. She had betrayed her own instincts, traded her dignity for a proposal that Ridge never asked for. Her life as a psychiatrist gave her the vocabulary to describe what had just happened: attachment trauma, dependency cycles, ego-disillusionment, but none of the terminology dulled the ache. Worse, the ambush had damaged more than just her pride, it may have permanently altered how Ridge saw her. And maybe that was the point. Maybe Taylor had finally pushed him far enough to make him choose not her, not ever again. Ridge, for his part, was unsettled. He hadn't wanted to hurt Taylor, but he couldn't lie to her. That wasn't fair. Still, Brooke lingered in his mind, not just as a memory, but as a presence that continued to define his emotional gravity. No matter how many times they'd fallen apart, she was his constant. And he hated himself for it. As the week of June 23rd to 27th unfolded on BNB, viewers saw the cracks form and widen in the delicate architecture of Taylor's hope. Social media erupted, some fans furious at how the writers humiliated Taylor, others gleeful that Brooke's hold on Ridge had once again proven unbreakable. But perhaps the most poignant commentary came not from fans, but from the characters themselves. In a rare moment of reflection, Taylor sat down with Steffi and admitted the truth: "I was trying to force something that wasn't real. You can't build a future on fear, and I was afraid. Afraid I'd lose him again." Steffi, her fierce loyalty tempered by sorrow, simply held her mother's hand. The proposal was over. The ring would go back in its box. But the emotional scars would take longer to fade. Taylor had orchestrated what she believed would be a life-changing ambush, but instead, it had changed her view of herself. And Ridge? Ridge was back at his cliff house, gazing at the ocean, trying to decipher why the pull toward Brooke remained so persistent. Maybe love wasn't meant to be tidy or logical. Maybe it was just about surrender. And maybe, just maybe, his refusal to say yes to Taylor wasn't just about Brooke. Maybe it was about finally saying yes to truth. For now, the future of Ridge Forrester remained unwritten, but one thing was clear: Taylor's humiliating fiancé trap had ensnared no one but herself.